As Jono said, we're in the middle of a planning reform process, and we've just seen the planning laws that sit behind this framework that we have for planning decision making about what developments we can have in our area and how much the community can actually provide input into that development decision making. So these laws went through on Wednesday. As Jono mentioned, our previous laws were called the Sustainable Planning Act, and it's a foreboding thing that now the laws will be called just the Planning Act. We've lost the sustainable part out of it. So that's a big disappointment. The good news being that the planning laws that the LNP had on the table, which were an absolute disgrace, didn't go through. So at least we can be happy about that. And it's thanks to the great work of many people here who put in submissions about the planning acts that we had the slight improvements we did see go through in comparison to the LNP laws in the new laws, that were passed this week. So some of the not so great parts of these laws that were passed, though, are just three things I wanted to mention. The first two things, just really quickly. Exemption certificates are being allowed for developers to basically apply to not need a development approval at all. So there's really broad, vague criteria around when this can happen. It's not actually been a part of our planning framework to date. It's a new thing. So that's an absolute disgrace. Basically, I might step back actually. I meant to mention how development is even assessed at the moment. So generally, if a development requires approval, it's either code accessible or impact accessible. Code accessible development means it just has to tick some boxes of some criteria, codes as they were known, and now assessment benchmarks as they're going to be known. And the public has no say at all on code accessible development. Impact accessible development is usually for more unexpected or risky developments, but the public actually does have a say in the decision making around that, and also appeal rights. So if they're not happy with the decision that's made, they can actually apply to the Planning and Environment Court to have an independent court actually consider the development proposal and the concerns the community's raised around that, and whether free from politics that decision should actually have been made. So it's a really important decision whether development is code accessible development or impact accessible development. So the exemption certificates exempts them from even going near that and not requiring a development approval at all. We also have the ability for developers to choose their assessment manager, so the person who assesses whether their development should be approved or not, from a list of development assessment managers that the council will hold. So you can see that there's a potential for very unfortunate relationships building between development assessment managers and the developers that are choosing them frequently to approve their developments. Happily, we did see a little bit of an improvement in terms of dealing with the conflicts of interest that could seriously arise as a result of that, but much more could be done to address that. In fact, taking it out completely would be much more appropriate.
Yeah.
Exactly. But what I wanted to focus on today is this ability for development to either be code accessible or impact accessible development, and your right to actually have a say in that development. So that's a decision the local governments make, whether a decision to type of development should be code or impact accessible. We're seeing, obviously, UBSO is a perfect example of the community being locked out because of code accessible development and the amount of outrage that can cause a community. So it's a really important decision that we think much more guidance should be given to local governments as to when development must be impact accessible, and therefore the community must be given a say in the development. Obviously, we prefer even better community input in all stages of development, that we don't have this situation where code accessible development exists, that the community is completely locked out of having a say. I know New South Wales are actually considering bringing in the ability for the community to be notified even prior to the application going into the council. So there's really meaningful community conversations going on as to what the future of the area will propose to be and what the development should be to match the community's expectations. So they're not fantastic people like Jono do sit in local governments, but as Jono was saying before, they don't always have the amount of power that they need to get the right decision made. So we need the state government to really be pressuring local governments, well, not even pressuring, just requiring that some development has to be impact accessible, and the public has to have a say in what that development should look like. So if proper meaningful consultation were provided for the ABSO site from the start, obviously the development would much more likely be meeting your needs and expectations, and would have turned into a better quality development at the end of the day. So Customs House is actually another really good example. You might be aware that in Brisbane City, Customs House has been subject of some attention recently because there's a big skyscraper that's been proposed right on the border of Customs House, actually against what the city plan proposes for that site and the protections that were afforded to the heritage nature of Customs House. But this, have a guess what this development is being assessed under? Yeah. Code accessible development for one of the most beautiful heritage buildings we have in Queensland, the impacts that development will be facing. So this was due to a loophole that the developers could use in the city plan that allowed them to actually assess it under code. So it's an absolute disgrace. So we really believe good decision making, and I'm sure all of you believe good decision making happens when the community is involved at every level of planning and development decisions. So the planning reform process is not over yet. There's still a lot more to do in terms of the supporting instruments behind these acts that were passed this week. They're all going to be reviewed this year as well. So please stay tuned on EDO Queensland and Brisbane Residents United and WECA's websites and social media for, we're going to be having at EDO Queensland some more law jams. So it sounds fantastic, I know, but they are fun. To give community input into and information on how you can get involved in the supporting instruments to make sure that your expectations of planning are represented. And also just some information on developments as they occur. So also the South East Queensland Regional Plan, so a broader level guide to how we can develop as a region sustainably is also up for consultation. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, just wanted more. Thank you so much for all the energy you're putting into making sure West End and this whole region stays sustainable. Thank you very much. Keep up the good work.